So today I'm going to talk about the visuality and visibility of European border zone, and particularly the visibility of death and survival during the perilous journey across the borders. So this might not at first seem to link to our theme of deportation, but I assure you it will, because I'm exactly interested in how certain border zones are spectacularized and made very visible in the media, whereas other border zones are much more invisible. And of course, you know, border-related death is a present issue in Europe. The central Mediterranean route, for instance, is the deadliest border zone in the world. Almost 9,000 people died in this stretch between North Africa and Italy since January 2014. So the question for us media scholars is interesting. How do we as European audiences witness this management of European borders and its human consequences? How and through which agents do we hear and see what happens there? And of course, media are instrumental in witnessing such distant suffering in different ways. First, journalists, photographers, bloggers, anyone actually with a camera and the ability to tell witnesses or can witness using the media technologies that are available. Second, eyewitness accounts of those who actually intimately experienced such suffering can be mediated through different media. And third, by watching and reading, we are, as audiences, also become witness through media. But this media-mediated witnessing is never the same. It depends on who tells and how, what kind of identities are created of those who witness and of those who suffer. Also, what kind of positions we are invited to take while we are witnessing. I have some images for you to highlight some of the points. So one important question is that how do those who witness respond? And in this talk I wish to bring some critical notions to the humanitarian response that is now such a prevalent issue in Europe. So we need to ask what does it do to people like us to know that thousands die at the European borders and that our government's policies have been instrumental in producing the conditions where these fatalities happen. So I'm interested in bearing witness, which is different from just looking at something, as several scholars have pointed out. Bearing witness is about taking responsibility for contemporary events. So it's about acting when you know about something. In addition, it's necessary to think what is an ethical and responsible way to witness. So how can we cultivate such cosmopolitan sensibility of bearing witness to border-related death and survival? I would first like to argue that the multiplication of bordering agents has diversified mediated witness of the border zone. Because 5-10 years ago, if there were any images of rescue, suffering and death in the Mediterranean, they mainly originated from professional photojournalists who accompanied national coast guards and military in their operations, or images that were disseminated directly by these security agents, such as European Border Control Agency Frontex. So before, there were no GoPro cameras attached to the helmets of activists and rescuers, and no mobile phone videos migrants may have taken. They were not circulated to wider European publics. So one example, for instance, in this multiplication of bordering agents is the privatization of rescue. There's this image is from a video of MOAS, which is a private rescue operation in the Mediterranean. So the agents that manage these European external borders have multiplied during the recent decades. In the Mediterranean, this is simultaneous to an increase humanitarization of discourse. So there's what I call humanitarian bordering. So let me just explain a little bit what I mean by this term, humanitarian bordering, because of course it's contradictory. How could prevention of people who seek protection in Europe be humanitarian? First, I want to underline that I'm talking about a verb, bordering, which is about doing something. So we shouldn't focus on borders as some lines drawn in the map or in a landscape, kind of referring to what Anita was saying before about the externalization and extension of borders. Because borders are constantly produced, negotiated and contested. Also in places where we wouldn't expect, and in ways that seem somehow unimaginable for those who easily cross from one country to another. Yesterday, for instance, Sara Belander explained how family reunification and visa controls function as technologies of the border, starting from the inaccessibility to necessary paperwork and to Finnish embassies where a family member needs to go to give an interview during this process. So there are some sites in this European archipelago of border sites that are more accessible for journalists and activists, and therefore they are more visible to European audiences. Greek Islands was one case, is one such case. It's actually much more accessible for journalists than the central Mediterranean route. So the southern European border, like all the other borders, need to be understood as an archipelago of sites where bordering practices manifest in different ways. And it's a zone that expands beyond the territorial border to spaces like detention centers in Libya, which are often actually financed and facilitated by European Union. And as activists, we tend to focus on the securitization and militarization of the border and on technologies that prevent people from coming and technologies that detain and deport them. However, in the past decade, humanitarian rationality has grown within this border regime and within the border management, including these securitizing actors such as national military and Frontex. Managing the movement of people and controlling the border is now also framed in terms of alleviating suffering. It's about saving lives, about rescue and protecting vulnerable groups. And I'm just going to show you one example of how it's the Italian military navy that produced this. It's here. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So it's the Italian Marina Militare, the Navy, produced a reality TV show about their operation during Mare Nostrum. And this is a production that is embedded within the Italian mainstream media. And we can see how through this reality TV program, the audience are invited to join the perspective, the view, the gaze of the Navy, and how it invites us to participate in this caring identity of Italians. It's also reinforcing the emergency paradigm that is often immersed in this humanitarian perspective, that something happens suddenly and therefore we need some very sudden responses. So let's just pause for, I know it's the afternoon and the third presentation, so I wanted to entertain you a little.
Oggi il comandante Pellegrino accetta il comando di nave libera dopo un anno di comando eccezionale, partecipando a molteplici missioni, prima fra tutte l'operazione Mare Nostrum.
La forza vacillante, sereno da voi, avete coraggio, non so solo cosa sia stato per me essere comandante di nave libera, il vostro comandante. Viva la nave libera, viva la Marina Militare Italiana, viva l'Italia. Il mio nome è Katia Pellegrino e questo è il racconto degli ultimi 60 giorni al comando di nave libera dello Stretto di Sicilia.
you got the idea of this.
Okay.
Yeah. Of this, and it's the visuality of Moas, for instance, in the present time is not so different. But this whole discursive strategy of humanitarianism is a simulation of language and practice that originates from a different context, from humanitarian action and philanthropy into another context, border control. And this discursive dislocation directs our attention towards humanitarian connotations such as protection of vulnerable groups and an image of an ethical and politically neutral agency, for instance, for the Italian Navy. And therefore, this simulation weakens the connotations that the public might associate with the violence of the structures that produce the border, or criticism towards increased investment in border control as well. As we know, the budget of Frontex have multiplied more than 20 times during its 20 years of existence. And the deviant actor in this scene of humanitarian rescue is particularly the smuggler who ruthlessly makes money out of people's suffering. But of course, it's not the whole picture. But through these border spectacles, also a figure of threatening illegal migrant, the figure of potential terrorist or potential rapist is created. So my argument is not that this discourse of securitization and militarization would have shifted totally towards humanitarianism. It's rather that these discourses and rationales of securitization and humanitarianism coexist and entangle. And the second dimension in this so-called humanitarian bordering is that the agents that operate in the border zones, making what it is and how it functions, have multiplied. In addition to securitizing agents, such as military and Frontex, intergovernmental agencies, transnational humanitarian organizations, spontaneous volunteer groups, private rescue operations, NGOs, and so on have gained a growing presence in the border zone and fusing logics of securitization with those of humanitarianism. So what is interesting in this multiplication of bordering agents for media researchers is that all these agents are not only sources for journalists, but they also produce their own media, and they actually are media. Because for many, producing media is a very important part of their practice. The agents that rescue migrants from sea, Frontex, the Navy, MSF, MOAS, German Sea-Watch, they not only rescue, but they also make sure that their rescues are filmed and mediated. For instance, the German volunteer rescue group Sea-Watch started actually as a witnessing operation. The argument was that if the activists actually were present in the border zone, watching and witnessing, they could protect the migrants from ignorance. The multiplication of agents is also results increase of visuals of previously inaccessible scenes. And a lot of this visuality is now directed to possible donors as invitations to fund the action in the Mediterranean. After 1 year of the death of Alan Kurdi, or actually a year after the image of his dead body circulated global mediascapes, death in the border zone does not shock anymore. It's becoming a normalized visuality of what irregular migration is about. To get the attention, the rescue agents need more dramatic visuals. And some of this mediation resembles action film, very dramatic scenes where migrants fight for their lives. And Europeans in these border spectacles are the well-equipped heroes with the, like we see all the fancy equipment, drones, helicopters, diving equipment, medical equipment, and so on. They are the ones who care about the migrants, hold babies, and smile. And the aesthetic of the migrants in this visualization is the one who's expressing suffering. They are emotionally unstable, we hardly ever see solidarity between them or care between migrants. And this kind of emergency paradigm is very much stressed by the new media technology, such as the GoPro aesthetic, because it positions the spectator as the one in the middle of action. It is shaking and moving in action, and it's looking where the rescuers are looking. So as spectators, we feel that we are in the middle of action, gazing towards the refugees. So we become part of the team, either the team of humanitarianism or the military, and as they often operate together in these same scenes, the humanitarian and the military actors integrate into one. And as spectators, we enter these scenes through these actors and we adopt their gaze. So, but in addition to these agents, rescuing agents, migrants contribute to the visuality of the border, so increasingly through their own media practices. Footage from mobile phones, photographs taken during the journey, and selfies circulate not only among diasporic groups, but increasingly through activist networks and mainstream media collaborations to wider global publics. All these activist and migrant-produced visualities are also embedded into mainstream media very often. Médecins Sans Frontières blogs are remediated in the mainstream media. German Sea-Watch, they just released a while ago an image of a dead baby through Reuters, and BBC used the GoPro footage of Hassan Akar, a Syrian refugee who filmed his journey across the Aegean Sea between Turkey and Lesbos. And there's another example of an art project where migrants filmed their journey, and I think that in these kind of visualities we can find more intimate, different kind of perspective, which also visualizes solidarity among migrants. Not so that migrants are not only the recipients of European humanitarianism and care, but it's an invitation to a more horizontal circle of caring. But if everything can be filmed, does it translate into bearing witness? The idea that I started with, is it ethical and responsible? The abundance of images about rescue produces hypervisibility of this one dramatic moment in the often long and perilous journey. It's a moment of the journey that somehow fascinates us Europeans. And at the same time, it allows us to forget the other violent and complex border side. So the focus on rescue and the visibility of humanitarian organizations and activists working together with and often being embedded into military actions produces an illusion of humanitarian border control. European authorities become the heroes who care and save lives. And the practices and structures of European governments are often made invisible. And at the same time also the other border sites, such as the deportation centers, or the detention centers and deportation practices are made invisible. So I think my time is up. Yeah, I will stop.